Hello and welcome to our T Level Health bite-sized recording on teaching and learning activities and formative assessment for the occupational specialism. First of all, I would just like to start with a disclaimer. All information provided is correct as of recording of April 23 and may not reflect future changes to guidance documents. Please always review the most up-to-date guidance. So my name is Tracy and I am joined by Marina and we are Provider Development Officers with NCFE. Our role is to provide support with CPD focusing on teaching and delivery in the health and science T levels. My key expertise comes from teaching in FE, health and social qualifications, and I've used that experience and adapted key pedagogy and teaching strategies to support the teaching and the delivery of the T levels.
Hello, my name is Marina and I'm also a Provider Development Officer. My background is in science. I have a PhD in neuroscience with a medical research focus. So I have that experience of applying those core scientific concepts to various different medical research questions. My teaching experience is maths and science, so really delivering those sometimes tough to teach or tough for students topics in an engaging way. So I like to bring that to my support when it comes to the T level. The aims and objectives of this recording. So we're aimed at teachers and tutors, those delivering the T Level Technical Qualification in health. So we're focusing on the occupational specialism areas. And here we have the objectives of the session. So let's look at what your students need to succeed. So first, when we're looking in the world of formative assessment, we need to think what journey is it that we are tracking and that we need support. So here we have, starting from those academic skills, students then build on, they get that vocational knowledge and they can apply those vocational skills. And then finally, ultimately, we get to the professional behaviours. So this whole journey that our students go on, and we would, in order to support them and help develop them, it's important that we formatively assess each level of this journey. How do we know what to formatively assess? Well, we can obtain key skills by looking at the content holistically, reviewing the assessments, and assessing what our students will need to be successful beyond the T level. So if we start with academic skills, the T level is unique in its assessment styles, and the assessments like the Occupational Specialism assignments, the synoptic assignments, these will be something your students have not encountered before. However, the academic skills they learn to be successful in these assignments are also key in supporting them in their further career and/or study. So let's explore some examples. We have critical analysis, problem solving, summation and synthesis. We can see these 3 points feature very highly in the synoptic assignments, where students have to use knowledge from various parts of their training, knowledge and skills, and apply it to solve a problem. The communication, including to different audiences, including written, including verbal. Digital skills, highlighted written communication skills is very important in the health sector. And capacity for independent study. We have separate bite-sized recordings on how to develop these strategies, how to develop these skills in your students. And we have that recording on our YouTube playlist. Now moving on to vocational competency, specifically the knowledge and skills. The specification helps us out here by splitting the content into knowledge and skills. So with regards to our formative assessment, we need to know what to assess, and we can obtain these from the specification. So here's an example here from the Occupational Specialism core, the supporting healthcare core. See, on the left, we have knowledge statements, and then on the right, we have matching skill statements. These are some that we have pulled from the specification. And what you could then do is group these into common elements and frame your formative assessment to span multiple areas. Here are some more examples that we've also obtained. So for example, for the knowledge, you'll have personal development, so why personal development and feedback is important. And then the skills of that are maintaining a record of personal development and using feedback to develop and improve. We could take that section and we could design a formative assessment activity around that. And finally, we have professional behaviours. These build on the foundations of vocational competency and academic skills. It's those things that your students will develop in class, in sim sessions, and also on placement. So some examples of areas that you can formatively assess. The monitoring, supporting, and reassuring patients through effective communication. Being inclusive, challenging discrimination. Collaborative attitude, comfortable offering, receiving praise and feedback. So here we can see the beginnings of different types of vocational skills and different types of academic skills, such as communication, coming in here. And demonstrating person-centered care. These are just some examples. You can come up with a variety of your own. And this is important to help. What you formatively assess is also tailored to your students. So it's important to help them develop. So let's take a step back and understand what the purpose of formative assessment is. So here we're creating work-ready skilled students. This is because formative assessment extends beyond the knowledge, especially for the vocations that are in high need of skills, such as those in the health sector. Second factor relates to retention of knowledge. This is not just for the upcoming exam. This is applying and reviewing the retention of knowledge on an ongoing basis because it will support students in the next step in their journey. Also important to assess individual breadth and depth of learning. Formative assessment activities will capture the journey for each student, and they will track how the student progresses in their learning, including in their industry placement. It's also useful to include which interventions, support, additional learning activities, and staff are involved as well. And then reviewing the progress against the students' individual targets. So each organisation has their own tracking system with the results of initial and diagnostic assessments, existing qualifications, ILPs, targets, and learning goals. So how you design your formative assessments to fit in with your organisational structure is up to you. What's important is that ongoing progress and development is tracked, and each student's journey is documented, and they know exactly what they need to do to progress and excel in each aspect of their programme. The question to ask yourself is, do you currently have a formative assessment plan? If not, it would be important to create this and to incorporate it in your delivery plan. Here we're looking at the difference between formative and summative assessment. So when we focus on assessment, we often think of summative assessment. That's the assessment, that's the topic test at the end of learning, or where we give students a mark, and this is we will compare it to what they got the last time they did this. Formative assessment is different. It's evaluation during learning, evaluation of key skills, and it'll be covering that small content. So providing that ongoing feedback and improving instruction. So while both formative and summative assessment have their purpose, formative assessment is what we're focusing on here as it supports the development of learning. So let's look at some examples. So here we've color-coded what's being assessed. I'm about to show you a table. Everything in red is assessing vocational knowledge. Everything in green is assessing vocational skills. And we have professional behaviours in yellow. We've split it into formative and summative assessments. You can see here we have a mixture. Some assessments, such as a report, are just assessing that vocational knowledge. Or you can have peer and self-assessment focused on professional behaviours. But then you can also have these kind of more holistic assessments, such as competency-based interviews, which would assess all three knowledge, skills, and behaviours. It's important to vary the method and type of assessment. This is to keep students engaged, but also to capture the learning of students with different learning styles. And of course, throughout all of these assessment methods, we will be including the assessment of academic skills. So practically, we have an example of a way you can do this. So a great engaging way that you can group formative assessment activities is with formative assessment stations. This is where you divide your classroom and there'll be a different station with a different formative assessment about the classroom, and then students rotate and perform a variety of formative assessments throughout the day. Now you can use these to assess or embed the same topic through multiple different assessments or types of assessments, or you can assess different areas with each station. So here we have an example for health. In one station, students could create a healthcare plan. A separate station could have a case study, and there's themed questions or written clinical stimuli. Students respond in writing. You could then have a practical session, with students demonstrating those skills. A professional discussion with a tutor. And students rotate through these 4 stations. Then finally, all of them come together and finish with peer marking and reflection templates. So we're really bringing that whole holistic theme together.
So how do you know how your students are progressing? Feedback has always been the standard of sort of formative assessment. However, feedback would seem to be most valuable when it can cause changes in future understanding, approach, or confidence, such as the future improvement in learning, and also assessment work can be actioned. Feedback is only useful when it can help learning progression. So let's explore this in a bit more detail. So when doing live marking, tutors can use acronyms like these to give instant relevant feed forward to their students, whether that's SAP, summative assessment piece, DIRT, directed independent reflection time, or essay, self-assessment. With understanding of these acronyms, students can make the most of their feedback and feed forward. Sharing them on classroom displays will help support students with understanding of how they're being assessed and what is being fed back, and help with valuable time with yourselves as a teacher. This also focuses more on the process rather than the end product. Let's look at benefits of this. So recent research explored the impact of effective feedback, effective feed forward. It was found that key benefits of students were that they were more confident. They had an increase in self-evaluation skills. They had better engagement, improved attendance. For tutors, it really helped build that student rapport. It gave them a greater understanding of their learner needs and allowed for regular progress monitoring. So the outcomes from this research suggested that feed-forward approaches allow students to increase their overall effort when attempting summative assessments and thus improve their performance, engagement, and retention. So let's look at how else we can get students involved in formative assessment, as this is a really key way to engage students. How students can design their own formative assessment task. So here we've got an example of how, I beg your pardon, students can create their own formative assessment tasks. So you've got knowledge and skills in the green, and you have like a question or a task in purple. So what your students would do is they would pick 2 green and 1 lilac. So they can either pick 2 knowledge statements, or they could pick a knowledge and a skill statement and link that with a question or a task that's going to then assess that knowledge and skills. So this example is just from one performance outcomes that we shared earlier, but obviously you would want to maybe do this across several performance outcomes to allow that holistic way of assessing. Throughout this task, you will get the students to complete an assessment. You could get students to complete an assessment of learning as they go through to really help evaluate what they're doing. In this example, the students have to explain how their choices link together to increase understanding of the knowledge and skills and how they link, clear on what they're going to create, what are they assessing beyond just knowledge, so those vocational professional behaviours, and how is it assessed? So are they going to use a RAG rating, Are they going to use grading descriptors, which we will shortly have a look at how to create grading descriptors that your students can use regularly. And finally, students need to then reflect on this process, because this will really be a key element to support deeper understanding. Another really useful way for students to really understand how they're progressing and to formatively assess from a self-assessment and peer marking way is to get students to use grading exemplification materials. So on our NCFE website, there are both pass and distinction materials. This example here is the pass from the Support in Healthcare core. So step one would be to give the students both the pass and distinction exemplar without the grading without the examiner commentary, etc. Give the students the grading descriptors would be your step two, and the students would then mark the exemplar using the descriptors to support their reasoning for an overall grade. Finally, once they have come to decision on the grades that they've given, so we might get this done in group work, that you would then give the students the examiner commentary to see whether or not they agreed and what they would then change. This can be used to support formative and summative assessment marking and reflections. So let's have a look at how to create grading descriptors for this continuous assessment to really help support students. So at the beginning of the year, collate grading descriptors from that lower to higher band to support that continuous formative assessment. And this will allow for efficient feed forward, so a bit of time in the beginning to allow that sort of more being more productive use of time in the future. Here are examples that we have collected from the Chief Examiner commentary and from the graded exemplification material and the grading descriptors. You can clearly see that the adjectives used are clearly differentiated between the lower and the higher band. So you have basic versus excellent, lacking in detailed, limited versus highly detailed, evaluations are comprehensive. Once you've created this, this will be a very valuable tool both for yourselves and for your students. And finally, as mentioned earlier, how do we actually use the occupational specialism component of the spec to create themes across the performance outcomes to help focus formative assessment and the assessment of those key competencies and skills? So step one, collate the headings in the performance outcomes. Step two, group them together into overarching themes. This will allow your students to bring knowledge and experience together across all performance outcomes. Step three, create a scenario, a skill session, a case study with tasks or questions that the students will apply experience and knowledge to. And finally, then get the students to use reflective performers to allow them to reflect on what they need to do in order to improve. This strategy could be a key way to holistically and synoptically assess student progression. So thank you for joining us on this formative assessment recording. We hope you have been able to get some key strategies to support formative assessment in the T level. Thank you.
Thank you.